Hello, I am Amanda Cassar, and welcome back to season 2 of Financial Secrets Revealed, where we continue to shine a spotlight on financial abuse. And today I am joined by the divine Dana Diaz, who would love to share her story with us. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you for
Very,
having me.
very
How are
well.
you?
Now, reading through your profile,
Good.
I have to say, I think you are the closest thing to a narcissist magnet that I've ever come across. So,
Yes.
in your childhood, you had narcissistic parents when narcissism may not have been a thing then. Then married one. I
Right.
suppose there's the patterns there, and now identify some
Yeah.
among your in-laws as well. So, how did your discovery
Yes.
of all these personality traits and everything start unfolding for you?
The funny thing is that when I was a child, and I mean a very young child, my mother was with my stepfather, who is the supreme narcissist of all. Um, and there was always something in me that said something didn't sit right. I was a child. I had no verbiage for it. I couldn't put my finger on it. But I always sensed there was a duplicity about him. He was one way around people. And then behind closed doors, it was what I perceived to be the reality. That's when I would be told I was never wanted, I was never going to be loved, he shouldn't have to pay for another man's child, all these things. But in front of family and in front of anybody, his arms around me. Oh,
The street angel,
my wife's
home
little girl,
devil.
she's
Yep.
mine now. Call me dad. Yeah, and there were all these stories. I was coached, nobody needs to know he's not your father. Call him dad. Don't call him by his first name. It was creating this facade. And as time went on, even as a kid, I called them stories. I was always given stories, or I would hear them tell their stories, their version of whatever to other people. And I guess it's part of my nature that I don't know, I'm just who I am, and I'm truthful and direct and honest. You get what you get with me. And I was that way as a child and very strong willed. So I would speak up, but my mother never defended me, never defended herself. She actually went so far numerous times as to tell me just go with it. It's okay to be a hypocrite. She even wrote in a letter to me a little later. It's not who I am. So
You're a
I
problem
sensed
child,
it,
aren't you?
but I had no idea. I was, well, and that was one of the stories. And there are family that's I'm 47 years old. And yeah, I still hear about how I was difficult and I was rebellious. And it was like, no, I was just calling
Being honest.
things
Yeah.
like I saw them. And and unfortunately, I actually, I authored a book about my former marriage to a narcissist, but I am in the process of publishing a book about my childhood. It'll be the
Well, you're
prequel.
going to be
Um,
popular at
but I even
Christmas, aren't
say
you?
that, yeah, I mean, yeah, well, there's no contact. I don't get invited. I haven't been for years, but that was the thing, is that I actually said in the book is that when you have a problem, you solve the problem or you get rid of the problem. That is actually it. I was the problem. I was the problem because I saw the truth. I told the truth, and I was going to expose,
The
the truth for
hypocrisy of
what
it.
it was. But that's the thing about narcissists, is that you can't expose them. And when they know you're on to them, yeah, you're problem number one, and they're going to go out there and smear your name, and your character and your reputation, so that nobody believes you. And here I am, and I'm pretty much orphaned and shunned,
Wow.
and it's a
Absolutely.
shame,
Absolutely.
but I'm at peace with myself, because I can't play a role in some show for other people. I'm not a puppet. I'm a human
Do you
being.
remember back then? Obviously, when you're with a narcissist, there's those forms of abuse that you're already talking about, the emotional abuse. Do you remember forms of
Yes.
physical abuse or financial abuse growing up as well?
Yes. Thankfully, there was no sexual abuse ever in my life. That's the one thing I can say. But yes, there was absolutely physical abuse from my stepfather. Again, my mother was more the enabler and the gaslighter and the hands off. But yes, I was very small. So he, basically bullied me. And when I would respond back with words and what was perceived as defiance, yes, it got physical. I was, it started with the grabbing, and I'd have hand marks, or the gripping so tightly, onto ankles, onto arms, whatever. There was pulling the back of, I always had long hair, pulling at the back of my hair, banging my head against the wall. When I tried to call for help once, I was trying to call my mother. I'm not sure why, because she never did anything, but he took the phone and banged me over the head with it. I just ran out of the house. I was yanked out of bed, hit my head all the time. I was strangled, thrown downstairs. But I'd go to school, and what's that mark? Oh, I ran into something. Oh, I fell. I must have hurt myself playing.
Yeah,
You don't say anything.
Cover-ups. So
yeah. Yeah. And as much as I didn't want to play into the stories, what was I going to do? I was a kid. I had to go home to it. I couldn't expose them that, when I was that young, and I knew I'd be handed right back into that
how old were
house.
you when your stepfather came into your life?
He was actually, talk about a narcissist. So he came into my mother's life. I maybe was about a year old. She is significantly younger than him, I believe 9 or 10 years younger. She was very attractive, very young. I was actually the result of a teenage pregnancy. So she was very young. He was, about to turn 30, and she was a young, very attractive woman. And there he was. And it turned out, I found out not much later, even though I was small, I understood what was going on by the time I was 5 or 6. But apparently he was married, not separated or divorced, actually married, living with his wife in a home that his wife's grandparents bought for them as a wedding present. And he was dating my mother for over a year, I believe, until she found out that he was married. She had no idea. And the story is that she told him that they were done until he actually got a divorce. So he went and divorced his wife, kept the house that his wife's grandparents gave to them for the marriage. And then I guess my mother was fine with that. And there we were. So unfortunately, my whole life that I can remember, he's been
And
there.
so we've touched on, obviously there's terrible emotional abuse, there's awful physical abuse that is showing up as well. You did mention financial was used to control the family as well. And I think you said a little brother came along as well.
Yeah. And the financial, and I apologize, I didn't touch on that as much as I should. For how it affected me as a child, it was the little things. I was born Catholic. My mother's family's from Puerto Rico. So, of course, I was put into a private Catholic school. Well, he didn't understand why he had to pay for me to go to school. Why couldn't I go to public school? So, we barely had moved in with him, and there was no more private school. We didn't need to pay for that. So I saw I had, all my friends were going to that school now, and I had to be thrown into this other school that I didn't know anybody, in a very prominently Caucasian suburb of Chicago, where I was the only one with the curly Hispanic hair, and I rolled my R's because my grandmas did. So what did I know? And I was made fun of for the clothes I wore. It was a little traumatic, as I'm sure any child would understand if they had moved or anything.
Throwing them straight back there. Yep.
Exactly. Yes. I was bullied a lot. And that's the thing, but I always stood up for myself, and I'd stand up for other little girls that were bullied. But at home, it was over time. I'd see how it was with my mother too. She couldn't spend money or even medical insurance. He could have medical insurance. He could go to the doctor, but we couldn't, not without his permission and approval. And he never saw fit for us to need a checkup or, any kind of treatment of any kind. If he got a bill, it was an issue. I remember once as a teenager being out and I had a terrible pain. It turned out to be a UTI, which anybody who's had one can know how awfully painful. I was writhing in pain. My friends didn't know what to do, took me to the emergency room. I don't know if I've ever heard the end of it. He'd call my friends Florence Nightingale after that, the yelling and screaming at home for the bill he had to pay. So it was, for me to have braces, it doesn't sound like financial abuse. It sounds like a man who's complaining. But the thing is that he had Corvettes. He had very expensive watches and cameras and things. He was very much about the things and the status symbols. It's not like the money wasn't there. So this wasn't a situation of, oh my gosh, we have no money to pay for this. It was, he didn't have money to pay for any of us to have basic things. Only he could have basic things and luxury. Nobody else could, at least not me. And my mother would go along with it and kind of take what we call that breadcrumbing, but she'd take the crumbs that were thrown at her because she liked the life. She liked having the house and the car and the stuff. But that just wasn't, it didn't work out very well for us as far as she just didn't see it the way I did.
So when your little brother, who's your stepfather's child, comes along, was there a difference in treatment between the two of you growing up?
Yes. Before he even arrived, as soon as my mother was pregnant, because I had been hearing for so many years that I almost every day that I wasn't his child, I was reminded that now he did have a child being born. And then the rhetoric became, well, we're going to be a family now and you're not part of that because you're not my biological child. And that was literally told to me, you are not part, the three of us are going to be a family and you're not. And the thing that affected me most at that point, I was just about to turn 14. So at that point, I was at that stage where, you start becoming a snarky teenager and you're annoyed by anything your mother or father say. So
I love how feisty you are, Dana. It's just gorgeous. You must have been a thorn in the side for years.
Well, the thing is, we have to be real. And, there is that snarkiness that, especially from teenage girls. But, you add on to that I had been going through this for so many years. I just started with I would tell him he's an a-hole. Forgive me, I'm not going to say the word on your podcast, but I would tell him, you know what, F you, whatever. But the thing that affected me most wasn't even anything he did, although it was the actions that created it. But when my little brother I don't remember I think it was his preschool graduation. They do preschool and kindergarten every year they graduate. It's a celebration. But he was only 3 years old or something. And I remember being in the audience. They had each child come up as part of the graduation celebration and present the drawing they had made of their family. And my little brother went up there and, to backtrack a little, I was obviously very protective of him. I'd rock him at night if there was a storm and he was crying. Sometimes I'd bring him in my room. I was very protective of him. He went up there and presented the picture of his family, and I wasn't in it. It was my mother, his father, and him, and I wasn't in it. And that's when I thought, oh my gosh, this is what this man has done and what my mother has allowed. And how disgusting is that? Because my brother called me, to this day, he calls me sis. He's going to be 33 years old. He calls me sis or sissy. He knew I was his sister, but at some point, somewhere, he had heard enough to impact him to where he actually did not think I was his family.
And look, for a 3 or 4 year old to have already absorbed those lessons is just just awful. Narcissism seems to be a massive
Yeah.
theme among families where abuse of any sort seems to take place. Do you think people are born narcissists or become narcissists?
I believe they become narcissists because of their circumstances. And I know that there are people that, there's people that think the world is round and the world is flat, and people can believe what they want to believe. My perception is definitely that they are created. And in my experience, I have a belief that it's one of two ways. Um, the the one thing they both have in common is they need to feel important and superior. But either on the one hand, they grew up, and this is where my stepfather falls in. He was actually orphaned, and separated from his four brothers and sisters, and was abused in foster homes. I think that because he grew up very poor and very neglected, and he was also abused, he's just developed this need to, he will lie, to seem important. He needs status, and things to be perceived as important, and superior. It's just this, it's almost like they are putting on this show. They have to give off this sense that is not real, but it fills them with that void, of whatever they didn't have. On the other hand, and I'm dealing with a narcissist right now that this is the case, they are raised in, I always say we all want to raise our children, to be healthy and have a healthy self-esteem and a healthy self view of themselves. But when parents make their children, they overinflate their ego to make them actually think that they are better and prettier and more important and entitled to more than all other children and all other people. They grow up with that sense of thinking they really are that important and they really are that superior, and so you are going to go their way or no way, and if you don't go along with them, they will smear you. They will just absolutely
Wow,
destroy
interesting
you.
perspective there. Yeah, and I'm sure we're all sitting there going, "Oh, that works for that person." I know.
But and the other thing is though is that people can have narcissistic qualities and even be narcissists, but it doesn't
Yeah,
mean they're bad. I have a cousin, and I'm laughing because I mean, she loves herself. She loves her body. She loves the way she looks. She works very hard for her body and the way she looks, but she's not bothering
yeah,
anity with it. She's just
and you can always mute her on
she
Facebook or
really likes
Insta.
everybody
Yeah,
to know it. It's like you do. I can't argue with you.
good for
You look
you.
phenomenal in that bikini on the beach every weekend when
Oh,
you're
funny.
posting pictures. Yes. But it's not bothering anybody. That's why they call it malignant narcissism. Yeah, and that's where the abuse comes in, is when somebody actually is, causing you,
Yep.
intentionally causing you harm. That's where you get the narcissism that we're talking about. I just want to be clear on that, because I mean, I'm sure even I have narcissistic qualities at some times, and you might, but that doesn't make
Yep.
us
Do you
narcissistic.
feel that every person, like you said, we've all got the qualities at times, or we're proud of our achievements or
Right.
whatever. Doesn't mean we have to end up being abusive, like you
Right.
said. So, yeah, there's more words coming out now. You've talked about malignant narcissists. There's covert narcissists. It's becoming quite
Yes.
a thing. There's
Yes.
Facebook groups dedicated to, survivors of narcissistic abuse. So it's it's
Yes.
it's growing like a cancer. How do you think, like, this is, why is there so
Yes.
much of it now? Or is it just that we've now got a label for it, we can talk about it more openly?
I think it's basically everything you've said. I think one of the biggest things is that, in the past, if we talk about traditional generational roles, our grandparents' generation, let's say, and even some of our parents, depending, where we fall in the age range. But, it was expected that the men kind of ran things. And again, I don't want to offend anybody, that has different persuasions, but,
Absolutely.
traditionally the men ran things, called the shots, made the decisions. They were head of
Especially in the
household.
pre-war years.
And the
Absolutely.
women,
Yeah. Yeah,
exactly,
mum ran the
exactly.
house in the
And the
family.
women just
Yeah,
went along with it. The men cheated. The women didn't say anything. They just stayed home, made sure the
and the
house
kids
was
were beautiful.
clean and cooked, and the children, exactly. Everybody played their role. But I think it's at some point, between my generation, my mother's, maybe the next one, I don't know, somewhere in there when women started working. You have two parents working. You also had the internet, and communication. Now we have Facebook and all these things. I think a lot of this social media, and you can YouTube anything anymore. I think that this spread of information, as wonderful as it can be, has also created more awareness of it, where you have all the women that burned their bras in the 70s that are also now pirating now against men, or even women can be narcissists and
Absolutely.
abuse their husbands as well. But everybody's rallying together, and we didn't have any circumstances or organized way for them to do that, other than a
Support group
local,
or yeah,
which people didn't do that. Yeah, so I think it's just the availability of the knowledge, and the availability of information, and the ability to rally, which is what a lot of social media is just basically people of the same mindset or thought coming together, and calling themselves communities or
yeah.
groups or whatever, and discussing things and sharing things. So I think it's a combination of it. I think it's always been there, but now we have a name for it, and now we have labels and verbiage, and
Yeah.
it's a thing
So how
now.
did you go from this child who grew up in this toxic family home, the mother bear wasn't there to protect you, you've got this, I suppose,
Right.
not dissing your brother, but a very spoilt little brother who got everything you didn't get. How
Yeah.
did you end up moving into
Yeah.
then your marriage? How did you fall in love with your husband and then realize he too had narcissistic traits?
Well, the thing that narcissists are good at is mirroring you. And he said all the right things. And, I was out of my house as soon as I could when I was 18. That had always been the plan. But I met my former husband when I was
He
19.
was the
And
escape mission, the rescue pod.
oh, yeah. You know what? But he made me feel so loved. He loved me right from day one. He loved me. And even I remember thinking, there's no way, you don't even know me. How can you love me? But he loved me. He loved me forever. And it was the two of us against the world. And I mean, you're telling a young girl who comes out of my family situation these beautiful things every day. I wanted to believe it. So I did. I just let myself. Um, I wanted to be somebody's. I wanted to belong to some human group that was connected, because I didn't feel like I had a family. And in his family, and that was a big thing. I hate to say, he introduced me to his parents after only a week, and I thought, wow, if
He
he,
is serious.
yeah. And I thought, well, he must love me, and he must, think that much of me, that he wants me to meet them. And they were perfect. They were the perfect mother and father, like you see on TV. Um,
The
I
wholesome
wanted
sitcom
the
family.
family. I wanted the family. So it was really hard, because even though there were signs very early on, a lot of red flags, I just wanted to believe it. I was kind of vulnerable.
Oh, completely, yeah. So you talked about these red flags that I suppose with the benefit of hindsight were much easier to see. What sort of things were you ignoring or pushing down or pretending they weren't there from the beginning?
It was bursts of anger, punching walls, overreacting to very minor things. There's a chapter in my book where the first real big thing, I don't even know if we had been dating 2 or 3 weeks, and we listened to different types of music, and I came home after work one day and I was very excited to show him that I bought the new No Doubt CD that had just come out. There's Gwen Stefani on the cover in her little, 1940s red swimsuit thing and her hair all done and everything. Because I actually thought they were pretty cool. It was the sound I hadn't heard before, and he was really into them. And I thought, oh, look, we can listen to it together because we listen to music a lot together. And he got so angry. I mean, physically aggressed towards me. I mean, like, I was scared. I ended up on the couch, and the next thing I know, he took a small gift from under the tree and tore it open, and stuff was flying. And then the next thing I know, this compact disc in its case is flying at my head. And it's, again, it doesn't sound major, but it was all because he had already bought that CD for me for Christmas. Well, how was I supposed to know? How did I know? It
Instead of
could have
just
been
a laugh
handled
and a
so
giggle and,
differently.
oh my God, we've got the same taste.
Right, but it just went on. He started screaming at me, spitting in my face about how I just made him waste his money. And I'm like, it's a $15 CD. I just bought this one and I have the receipt. I can take mine back. It's not a big deal. But it was a
Yeah,
big
wow.
deal. He actually tore the wrapping off both of them. And so, to make sure I couldn't return mine. So now we made sure we wasted the money. And it's like, it's just hard to even process, because that's not a normal
Yeah.
reaction to a very minor situation. But again, I started to turn into my mother. I thought, well, I don't like this, but maybe he had a really bad day at work. Maybe I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed, and it was just an excuse. But, things kept happening, and I knew it was wrong. But gosh, when it was good, when he was really in a good mood, I got flowers and I got pretty things and I got taken out. And so it was like I would just kind of not ignore the bad things, but there was enough good to keep me hanging on, because I knew it was there and there was hope. And I thought, maybe when he matures, maybe when we get older. Well, 25 years later, no.
So do you find that pattern of behavior where it's whining, dining, looking after you, treating you, and then there's these crazy things that make no sense? Do you find that pattern repeats quite a bit in these emotionally abusive
Yes.
environments?
Yes. I mean, for me, even before I knew what the narcissism was or abuse, I always felt, I called it a push and a pull, a push and a pull. It was like going with the waves. And, you come up for air when you have a moment, and then it's like, oh, then you would be drowning again. And then you come up for air. But I've actually done enough reading and research. It makes sense to me now that the pattern is there because they keep pushing their boundaries. They have to be, really persuasive in the beginning. Even if their favorite ice cream is chocolate, if you go get ice cream, they're going to order they're going to order the butter pecan that I love because, oh, that's my favorite too, and they mirror you in that way because you think, oh my gosh, we're perfect together. They want you to believe that. But they do this, but then they act like themselves so that they can control you. But then when they feel like you're kind of pulling back and like, okay, she must be thinking there's, something wrong here. She might break up with me. That, oh, let's go for a lobster and steak dinner somewhere. Oh, I got tickets to that Broadway show you like, even though I've never seen a Broadway show in my life. I want to take you to do something you want to do. So it's almost like when they sense they're losing you or that you're onto them, suddenly they have to give you, there's that pull back in. Like, nope, we're meant to be. I'm taking care of you. I love you. Don't you see that? Look at all these things I'm doing for you. And then you're back in. And just until the next time that they do something, which is usually pretty often.
Yeah. Did you have children and stay together for a very long time with your partner?
Yeah, we had a child together. We had a child, and I love my son. But that didn't help things either. It was not meant to help things. I just got to that age where I thought I might want a baby, and he didn't, and then I convinced him to go along with me and have one. And once that baby came, it wasn't good at all because he fell from being the priority and the number one person that I was serving to the second. And that was a big problem. He resented our son. He would, it wasn't a joke, but he would refer to our son, and still does on occasion, as the king. The king gets everything. The king gets all your attention. The king, well, he was a baby.
Jelly
Yeah.
much?
Yeah, he was a
It
baby.
sounds so high school, Dana.
I
Wow.
know. Well, and he would use that for he would refer to himself as the king sometimes too. He felt like a king around this one, or if I treated him like a king, well, it got tiring after a while. I
Mm.
tried. I did try.
So was there financial abuse in your marriage as well?
Yes. That was a big one in our marriage. He did not understand why we should have our money together at first. So even though we were married, the bills came every month, and I was to pay him for half of the bills, and then he would, write the checks and pay the bills. So it was half and half, 50-50. He did not like that one year I made a little bit more money than him. That was not okay. That was I suffered for, I actually felt bad. He made me feel bad for doing well in my career. Got a promotion, even when it actually backtracking, even from that, when I graduated college, he ruined that day because I got a higher degree than him. But when he saw that I was making good money, then I was useful because he wanted to buy a house. Um, so I felt very used in my marriage for the money. And sometimes I even thought that he maybe stuck with me because he saw what my narcissist stepfather had, the Corvettes and the real estate and the watches and cameras, and very pretentious, and I think he thought that maybe he would have that all someday by, default, by
Association?
inheriting it. I know it sounds awful, but I mean, nothing made sense except for these things. But then as time went on, I mean, fast forward to the end of our marriage, he had been for several years saying that he was done working in his late 30s and that I
Poor
needed to
child.
pay all the bills. And I'm thinking, okay, I've been paying half the bills, most of the bills. Now you want me to pay all of them. And we have a son in private school, and the son needs braces, and you're doing this and that. And, he would just put us in these situations where even while he was still working, he had to have a boat, he had to have a dirt bike, he had to have a motorcycle, then he had to have a project motorcycle, then he had to have a Mustang, and and even if we didn't have money, he would spend it. There was once that he just randomly, just casually said, "I'm going to buy a new chainsaw tomorrow." And I said, "Well, what's wrong with your chainsaw?" He said, "Nothing. I just want a new one." And I said, "Okay, well, at this point, he had stopped working and had me in the position of having to pay everything." I said, "Well, I just finished paying the bills, and there was literally $3 in our checking account." And at that point, he had put us so far in the hole. We were $100,000 in debt. Um, he kept getting credit cards to pay for liquor, and he was a big drinker, tobacco, four-wheeler parts. I had $3 in the checking account. He said, "Well, you better find some money because I'm buying a chainsaw tomorrow." And I'm trying to explain logic. Like, I just wrote all these checks. I put the checks in the mail to pay for our lights and our mortgage. And he just said he didn't care. And he went out the next day and bought the chainsaw. And it went through and bounced all, all the checks I'd written for bills came back non-sufficient funds. So then I had all the fees on top of that, and I didn't have the money to pay all that. So then I got charged for every single day for every transaction that wasn't funded yet. But this is the stuff he would do. And it didn't happen just once. It was almost embarrassing. I got denied at the post office once for a couple of dollars in stamps. And the lady felt so bad for me. My son was on my hip, and there was a line behind me that, the cashier at the post office just pulled the money out of her pocket. She said, "Don't worry, I'll just pay for it." But it's embarrassing to have a partner that just puts you in these situations. But he was just selfish. The financial abuse comes out of selfishness. He wanted what he wanted, and he was going to find a way to get it. And if the money wasn't in the account, he was going to get another credit card. As a matter of fact, even after our divorce, I found this out after the fact. I was told, oh, he bought a house. He did. He hasn't worked in 4.5 years. How did he buy a house? Well, it turns out he used my tax returns. I'm self-employed. But we were married, filing our taxes jointly. So his name was on the tax returns, but it was my self-employment income he used to buy a house after we divorced.
Jeez.
And I'm laughing
Someone
because
wasn't doing
otherwise
their due
I'd be
diligence.
crying. I just don't understand how he got away with all the things he got away with. But, I was definitely a utility to him. I was a source of money.
So, Dana, a lot of women who are in financially abusive relationships, it's one of the main reasons they stay because their partner makes the money and is in
Yes.
control of everything and paying. They don't have the means to leave. So you're in a slightly different situation where you are the breadwinner, you are the one who makes the money and pays the bills, and yet still he's abusing you when you have the means. What eventually was it that came to a head for you that, okay, you're 100,000 in the hole, you fees and fees and fees. Was there a straw that breaks the camel's back moment for you when you went, I am so done? Or was it just the build up of every little thing for 25 years?
You know what? It actually was there was a moment, which actually didn't have to do with the money. But as far as the financial abuse, yeah, it is interesting that I was the one in the power position there. And that I hate to say, almost enabled it because I felt like there was nothing I could do, but I had very good credit. I wanted to keep my credit standing. I did not want to file bankruptcy like he told me to several times. I did not work that hard to file bankruptcy, and it just wasn't, we didn't need to, if he would just stop and be more, smarter with the money. But the straw that broke the camel's back for me was when I got sick, which, I had been very unwell for a while, but it was towards the end of 2018. Doctors, the gastroenterologist said, "Oh, you just have some digestive issues. Here's a pill." And another doctor said, "Oh, you just have anxiety." Another doctor said, "I don't know, you're maybe depressed or bipolar. I don't know. Here's a pill for that." Everybody's throwing pills at me. And it took me really just knowing something was deeper, something was much more wrong, because I'm a type A and nobody was really listening to me. So I made a spreadsheet of all the symptoms that I felt and marked. I had it for every single day. I'd mark how many times I was getting dizzy, blurry vision. My arm was going completely numb and dead, just, heart palpitations, all these different things were happening, the migraines, the stomach, the legs. I kept pursuing it, and he was very angry. Here was another one. I couldn't go to the doctor. All those tests are costing us money. I said, well, you know what? I'm making the money. So guess what? I'm going to find out what's wrong with me, because at this point, at the end of 2018, in a 2-week time period. And I remember the night it started, November 3rd, 2018. I will never forget, because we had a very, very big fight that night. And there were a couple points in our marriage where he did overpower me sexually, and it was, people can say you can't have involuntary sex in your marriage, but it was not consensual. And that
Marital
night
rape is a
just
huge thing. That's a weird thing to say. Yeah.
it is, but it happens. And that after that night, within 2 weeks, I dropped 15 pounds. I was down to 93 pounds and I was skeletal. And my body just, I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. And long and short of it, after a very good neurologist and Mayo Clinic was involved, they found out, the doctor sat me down and said, your body is shutting down. It's shutting down. You are at minimal survival bases in your muscular system, neurological, your heart, everything, your lungs, nothing. Your body is literally shutting down. And I just said, I don't want to die. I want to see my son graduate high school. I want to see him get married. I mean, I thought I'd be around a little longer at least, but that was the point where I just said, why is this happening? And they said it was because there's a stress hormone similar to adrenaline. It's called cortisol. It's the stress hormone. When you live in fight or flight for so long, which many abuse victims do, that cortisol is pumping into your body. And so the levels should be between 1 to 600, maybe 700 in any period in 24 hours. Mine were consistently in the 2,500 and higher range. They were astronomically high. So basically my body thought that it had, something similar to cancer, a foreign thing that they had to, everything started attacking the cells. It was attacking my own organs because it thought it had to eradicate this illness or this virus. And really it was just
trauma,
the stress, the trauma, the emotional trauma. When they say stress can kill you, it was actually killing me. And so the doctors kept saying, we could throw all these pills at you, but really you need to change your life. And I had one doctor tell me, I know you're trying. I know you may not believe in it. You need to divorce. You need to leave this man. You need to stop before you're dead. Wow. So that was it for me.
That's a wake up.
Choose myself.
Yeah, wake up call, like with a brick to the side of the head. That your body went, literally, we're done. Yeah.
Yeah. And even then, we didn't divorce for 2 years. But yeah.
But can we come to the end? You do have a beautiful new husband now. You're happy?
I do.
There is life
and
on the other side.
What? He was there the whole time. The funny thing is I was friends with his sister-in-law for 16 years or so. So small time, we'd known each other for many years. Beautiful. And he saw what was happening to me and he stepped in and we just kind of looked at each other one day like, oh.
You've been there all along.
Yeah, you were always right there. But yeah, it's beautiful to, have this amazing friend that turns out to be the love of your life. But you know what? He keeps me safe. He protects me. He loves me. As flawed and fiery as I can be. It's an amazing thing. And I do want to show people that too. It's not just about creating the awareness of narcissistic abuse, but showing people there's another side. It's not always easy to leave. And I don't judge anybody who decides to stay or feels that they have to, just for their own lives sometimes. But if somebody can get out, there is definitely hope for a beautiful life afterward.
Do you think now that you've found what an ideal or what most people would call a normal loving relationship looks like, do you think the fact that your mother and stepfather hadn't modeled that, you probably hadn't seen a lot of that growing up, do you think that's why you fell in the trap, or you didn't have the expectations of this is what a beautiful, normal, loving relationship looks like? Do you think that's part of it, or we don't set those expectations for ourselves?
No, I absolutely believe what I was modeling, what I saw. I mean, the thing is, even with my husband now, he's so gentle and patient and understanding, and it's strange because we don't argue and I don't understand it, and the I should be relieved and happy, but there are times where I'm so used to the chaos and the conflict that I don't like. I'm getting it as time is going on,
Slowly,
but
as
I
your
was
new
so
normal.
used. Right, it does take time. Like even my nervous system, like I've been putting on weight, and now I can sleep longer than 3 hours at night because everything in my psyche and my physical being is getting used to what normal is. And there are times where I will look at him or somebody else and say, is this what it's supposed to be? I mean, just basic things like I like him and like I respect him and I want to hear what he has to say, and he has the same feelings for me. But seeing my mother voice these things, like I said, she would encourage me to submit. Well, don't say that around your stepfather. Don't do this, it'll upset. It was always catering to him and his moods and the things that he wanted to control. She was trying to help him mold me into what I was expected to be. So when I jumped into this situation with my ex-husband, it seemed it, I fell into that same pattern of, oh, I better not say that because that'll upset him. I better not do this. I shouldn't even wear this. He didn't like me listening. It's what I called the rules. There were a lot of rules, and sometimes they were made up as we went, and sometimes they were spoken. But, then I have my mother, even in my adult life and in my marriage. Oh, he was with another woman and didn't come home till the next day. Well, sometimes men do that. Just don't make a thing of it. And, like I said, don't, she's telling me it's okay to be a hypocrite. And, she's telling me, well, as long as you have a clean house and, you know, it's like, I just, she was like priming me to live her life. And I just it didn't feel right
You now
in my
choose not
gut.
to.
It's not how it should be. But when you are surrounded by people that are telling you and forcing you to be in a situation that's like this, how do you know any different? Even if you know there's something different or think there's something different, it's not available to you.
So we know, from chats with other people that often the time when you do choose to leave can be the hardest and most unsafe time for people leaving abusive relationships. So for anyone who's sitting there listening, Dana, thinking, oh my God, this is my story, all these red flags are going off in my head, I didn't know there was another normal. Do you have any last bits of advice for someone looking to make the break?
Yeah, I have a lot of advice, but I'll keep it minimal. First and foremost, because I think for all of us, safety is a very big thing. I'm not going to promise that when somebody moves out, whether it's you or the other person, that things are going to get really great. It actually got much more violent after my divorce. And in my situation, the irony was that he had a very strong sense, and I wasn't shy about it anymore, that we were over, we were done, that was it. I actually got home one day and he was just gone. It was in the middle of the afternoon. I got home from work and the sheets were taken from the bed, the pillows, things were gone off the wall. He moved out. He had to move out because he couldn't have everyone thinking I left him. He had to leave me so that he could go tell everybody that I was harassing him and I was this terrible person that he had to leave. But then there were situations that my life was threatened. There was stalking, there was gun shooting, there was a knife brought to my door. It got bad. It got really bad, where I had to go to the courts and everything. So don't think just because it's over, but just prepare yourself. Prepare yourself if you feel that the time is right and that you can be safe. and you want to leave, just follow your gut. Because for 15 years, I wanted to leave and nobody could understand why I stayed. But when the time was right, the time was right. And you'll know when that is. But just be safe is the number one thing. And money, I had been socking away money for a long time. I hid money in an annuity that didn't have his name on it. I hid money in, I bought savings bonds that I kept in a little personal safe that could be carried by hand that he didn't even know about. Just grandma sends you $20 for your birthday, go get a $50 savings bond. Just it sounds silly, but I knew that when I left, whenever that was, that my son and I would have something.
Is there anything friends and family can do who are outside looking in to be supportive? Can they offer a couch? What's practical advice that other people can, who are going, look, I don't know how to help. It's a personal matter. What can they say or do that won't make it worse and actually help?
I think the biggest thing is we as victims are made to feel guilty and like it's our fault, and we're made to feel shame and there's judgment. So I think from my perspective, the biggest thing friends and family can do is, yes, of course, offer the couch, offer a bed, offer whatever, but do it with, I mean, it sounds terrible to say, but just do it. Just say, if you need a place, there's a couch. It will always be there, any hour, any day, any time.
Yep.
But without the conversation, we're made to feel that we can't talk about it, and we don't want to talk about it when it's happening or when we're still in it because we are so fearful. We just need to know somebody's there and somebody's not going to make us feel worse or put us in a situation where we're still vulnerable to this person. So just kind of a, a gentleness and safety, just so we know you're there, but we don't need a lecture. We don't need to be interrogated. We just need to be safe. That's
Yep.
our main
And,
thing.
and I think that's very generational as well. Like my grandmother and mother's words ringing in my ears right now. You made your bed, you have to lie in it. That kind of mentality, instead of, you know what, I don't know what's going on for you, but I have a spare room if you need it. It was obviously
Exactly.
much more practical and helpful than, yeah, on your own, on your bike. Yeah. So,
Exactly.
Dana,
And
thank you.
yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I really appreciate you helping spread the word and to give hope to people. It's really important that people understand that this goes on everywhere.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know it's not easy for people to come out of the closet with terrible abusive stories, especially from the people they loved and trusted so much. So thank you for sharing yours and hopefully helping other people who are going through your situation, or people watching people going through your situation, to be able to help and share. So really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.